I'm David Hackoff, Executive Director of NewFest, and I am really thrilled to welcome you to this virtual conversation, Queering the Votes. We have some incredible panelists who are really making waves here in New York City. This is quite a moment for the political landscape, particularly for the LGBTQ community. In just a couple weeks, we are going to be going to the polls. So it has really never been more important to have these discussions around what it means to be in elected office and to be fighting on behalf of the LGBTQ community. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's one of many conversations that we have a part of this year's festival. If you haven't checked out our other conversations, we had some earlier in the week on queer journalism and on centering Black, trans, and queer voices. We had a BIPOC queer film canon Kiki and all sorts of other things. And that's in addition, of course, to the 120 films that we have available to watch on demand virtually throughout the United States. They represent all aspects of the LGBTQ experience. So please visit newfest.org for a full schedule and to see all that we've going on at this year's festival. So I want to get into this conversation. I'm really excited. We have a great moderator. Wyatt Harms is the head of Buzzfeed LGBTQ, and Wyatt is going to steer us through this conversation. So here is Wyatt.
Thank you, David, and thank you for having us. I'm so excited for this conversation. I think when we think about this year and everything happening, obviously, it's sometimes hard to feel hopeful, and there's a lot of just kind of chaos and division. But I know for me, what really makes me hopeful is seeing inspiring queer politicians that are having a tidal wave movement right now. Really all across the nation, you see more and more queer leaders being elected. And that trend is especially true in our great city of New York. And so today I have joining me two New York City local politicians. And I'm super excited to talk to them. The first one is Marti Gould Cummings, and Marti is actually a dear friend of mine. And when I met Marti, the very first thing, it was 2 years ago, they came up to me, it was at a protest, and Marti goes, "I'm gonna run for city council." And I was like, "You know what? You are, and I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna support you, and we're gonna be friends." And ever since that day, Marti has been one of my close friends. But Marti is running in Manhattan, and it would be the first non-binary city councilor that New York city council member that New York has ever elected. And our other guest is city council member Carlos Menchaca. And Carlos is also incredibly inspiring. He represents the Red Hook, or he represents 38th District in Brooklyn, which includes Red Hook and a few other neighborhoods, and has been a real leader in everything from defunding the police to abolishing ICE to even a grassroots efforts to stop a huge real estate development that was not consulting the people of his district. And so he's very inspiring, and I can at least speak for one New Yorker that I'm very, very excited to see what he'll do next as his council term comes to an end. So without further ado, here's Marti and Carlos. Hello, hello.
Hi. Buenas tardes.
What a great intro. Oh my goodness. I know. I'm excited to have this conversation because I feel like it's like we can just kind of chat as friends. So I guess my first question is, one, what did I miss in your intro?
Marti, you go first.
I feel good about my intro.
You feel good about your intro? Really? Come on. I'll go. I love to ride my bike. That's how I get around in the whole city. Just yesterday, I was in Manhattan. We did this big press conference supporting a family who just got separated. The father was removed and is now in detention with a deportation. So I got to ride over to Manhattan, be a part of that. Rode back into Greenpoint. So I guess what I'm saying is I do my work and activism on a bike, and I feel like every intro from here on out should include that.
Let's expand the bike lines.
I'll second that. I love my bike, and that's why we need to become a city that expands our bus, bike, and pedestrian ways in our streets, expand open streets, and eliminate the use of cars to become a truly green city. We can become a leader in combating climate change, and one of the small ways we can do that is expanding our bus, bike, and pedestrian ways. I love biking as well, so maybe I'll bike to Brooklyn to see. That's a far ride for me, but I can do
bike
that.
to Brooklyn, and then I'll take you home on the west side. I'll drop you off on the bike.
Yeah, that Williamsburg Bridge is no joke. I city bike everywhere, and a lot of my friends live in Brooklyn. And I was just recently living in East Village, and so I would bike across that bridge quite often, and it is challenging, I will say.
City bike is so heavy. Oh.
Yeah, the city bikes are too heavy. All right, let's get into it. So I guess my first question related to queering the vote is, what made you decide to get into politics? We can start with Marty.
What made me decide to get into politics? I think like a lot of people in my age group, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but my experience with a lot of people that I know is we took being New Yorkers for granted. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to say, oh, I live in this progressive city in what appears to be a progressive state. Maybe not every, I don't have to go out for every election, whatever. And I fell into that trap. And 2016 was a big wake-up call of, no, every single election makes a difference, whether it's a special election, a local race, a state race, a primary, whatever it is. Every election makes a difference. And local elections are crucial to our democracy, as we saw with the budget in June and how that unfolded. And thank God we have council members like Carlos here who voted in the way that I believe the whole council should have voted. But that comes down to, what's happening. Okay, so today that we're filming, the Supreme Court hearings are starting for a new Supreme Court justice. How are ways we can combat what's happening in Washington? Well, that's through city and state elections. And so I had this wake-up moment in 2016 where I recognized these things to be true, and also saw that through my drag career, I had, by the grace of God, been given a platform. And I had a unique opportunity where I'm on stage with a microphone every day. And I love my drag career. It's exciting to have a following, but it was that moment of, okay, having Instagram followers doesn't really mean anything if you're not using it for the betterment of our world, And that's how I started getting involved in politics. And now here we are several years later running for city council. Did not know that was going to come, but here we are. So that's how, it was that light bulb wake up moment. And I hope that moment for me inspires other people to have that moment and get involved in every single election that happens.
Amen to that. I have to say that when I hear Marty speak about their entry into politics, I feel like the number one word is courage. You have to have courage to be able to step into this, which means that you have to be incredibly connected and passionate about something. And for me, growing up in Texas, in El Paso, on the border town, was not very, it wasn't easy growing up. Public housing and single mom, and a lot of my family were Mexican nationals, and so they couldn't necessarily visit us. We visited them. So from a very beginning, I saw this divide of government. Government was helping my family. We were connected to government programs. My family in Mexico wasn't, and I saw this like disdain for government, that somehow my government couldn't cross the border and help my family on the other side. And so from a very beginning, I was thinking a lot about government and how government could be better. Fast forward 2012, Superstorm Sandy comes in and destroys a lot of the waterfront communities in New York. And I dispatched into Red Hook and saw public housing and the whole neighborhood of Red Hook, where I live today, just destroyed. And government was just so slow to respond. And so I saw a crisis moment. I stepped in, and the local elected official here wasn't doing enough to be responsive, to be present. And I said, hell no, is this person going to run unopposed? She was running unopposed. And I said, someone's got to stand up and fight against her. And I did. And I won. And I became the first openly gay legislator in Brooklyn, the first Mexican-American elected in the city of New York. And that just led into where I am today, which is the chair of the Immigration Committee, and just doing a lot of good work to bring all these issues that our communities don't often get the opportunity to talk about, because there are so many marginalized communities that don't have a voice in the council. Yeah,
no, that really, I feel like that's kind of exactly echoing what y'all said around being part of a community kind of allows you to enter into these leadership roles. And so I guess as a follow-up question, how does your queer identity relate to your life and your work as a politician, especially thinking about interacting with New York City constituents? How do you find that identity, I guess, like expressing itself, and is it something that you see as a value as you talk to your constituents?
Yeah, well, first, shout out to El Paso. My husband's from there, so.
Yeah,
yeah, I'm from Dallas, actually, not near El Paso, but Texas. So we have that in common. Carly,
right.
We're gonna make Texas.
It's gonna flip blue.
It is. Yes, we are going. We are going. Okay, I've been like looking at all those state races. We can't get sidetracked on that, but like.
Yeah, so to answer your question about, so I would not only be the first drag artist in the state of New York elected, but I would be the first non-binary person in the city of New York. There's a counselor in Poughkeepsie, Sarah, who's non-binary, but I would be the first city council member who is non-binary. And I always like to, it's a big deal. Representation matters. LGBTQIA plus voices. The exciting thing about our community is we make up so many. I love being queer because we make up every background of humanity. And we need those voices heard at the table. But I also like to recognize, like, yes, this is a big deal, but I'm not just representing queer people. So it's my job as a candidate and as a hopefully soon to be elected to use my experience as a non-binary person to relate to what other people in my district in this city are going through. And how do I do that as a drag artist? Well, I'm a gig worker who, through the experience of COVID, has been out of work for 7 months. I don't have health insurance. The rent has not been canceled. And so every time the first of the month comes up, it's are we going to make it or not, this month? Are we going to be able to pay the bills? Do we have to write to our landlord and ask for, help? Especially as today that we're filming this, the eviction process is starting up again. So, I'm grateful for everything I have in my life, but I also know that as a gig worker, there are struggles that come with that. 3 businesses that I've done shows at regularly are now closed because of COVID. And this is something that is impacting people in my district and this city in astronomical ways. And many people don't have access to unemployment like I do because of their immigration status or the job they have. Maybe they're a sex worker. We should decriminalize sex work and make it so people who are in those jobs can have access to the same care that other people have. So that's how, yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, because I think what Marti really speaks to is the passion to the issues that impact our community. And I think having representation allows us to take that further, to fight for it even more. And these rooms that get constructed when you're dealing with budget, when you're dealing with legislation, if you don't have someone that is connected to that community, it is hard for us to push through and actually take it through the finish line. That I've so many times over and over again. And we have a big LGBT caucus right now in the city council, and that allows us for doing the good thing, doing the right thing. And that's where we have the speaker of the city council, Corey Johnson, and the finance chair, Danny Drum. But before us, there was, Tom Duane and Danny O'Donnell in the state fighting for marriage equality. And so there have been this long list of people who continue to fight. And so the last thing I want to say about my identity is that we do open the doors for folks that never thought they can actually wake up and say, I'm going to run for office. And I know that that is a community that we're impacting, of young people who are saying, I can get involved. And especially if Marty and I and other elected officials come out and say, run, which I think I try to say every time I talk to young people. I want everyone to feel like, and if you're out there listening to this, I want you to really consider running. We need you and your voice in the city council. And when I talk to young people, I feel like that's the most important thing, is just plant that seed and usher them in.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, sorry to interrupt, Wyatt. I just want to say, like, that's been kind of like the cornerstone of when we launched our campaign, is politics is for everyone. For far too long in our city and our state and our country as a whole, politics has been for what appears to be wealthier, cis, straight white men. And we need to have governing bodies that reflect our population. And that is a diverse coalition of people. And I love that we have a LGBTQ caucus in City Hall with 5 council members, but I want to see that expanded. Out of the 51 council members, I want at least 10. And I want queer representation from every part of the queer umbrella. And it's so exciting to see so many candidates running for city council now who are trans and non-binary and you know, representing all different parts of our community. I'm so excited for that. And I hope that they all get to be in city council and represent our community.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. I think you look at the slate of candidates, and it's in New York, but it's also really across like the entire country. It seems like queer people are stepping up and saying that enough is enough, and I can be a leader too. And I think that's so beautiful, and it's trailblazers really for a future that we all want to live in. So I guess kind of related to that, who are some queer politicians that inspire the both of you?
Marty, you first.
Okay, well, Carlos.
No.
Carlos is one, but I'll say, you know, somebody who, and I get asked this question a lot, and I always like to reference 2 people who I love dearly and who have been hugely inspirational to me and have been great friends, and through my process of running have really helped me. And that would be Andrea Jenkins, who was the first Black trans woman elected to public office in this country. She's a council member in Minneapolis. And to Honey Mahogany, who many people know from RuPaul's Drag Race, but they've been an incredible activist and leader in San Francisco and just won an election there a couple months ago. She is a true pioneer. She's a businesswoman. There's a incredible bar that I performed at in San Francisco called The Stud, that because of things like the industry city stuff that was happening in Carlos's district, came in San Francisco and really screwed a lot of local businesses and residents. And this business was in danger of closing. And so Honey and a bunch of other artists co-opted this business, and now it's owned by a lot of people as a co-op, and it was able to survive to help support local artists and the community. And I just thought that was such an incredible act of love of community, and now she's taken that into running for office. So I look to them often for guidance.
Right on. So mine is also from San Francisco, or has California roots. In San Francisco. I went to college in San Francisco. So I left El Paso, went to San Francisco, and learned all about, was inspired by Harvey Milk. So much of what I think since San Francisco really allowed was for this foundation to have courage for someone to represent a community that was never in a place of power. And even in his short term, I think he inspired so many. He continues to inspire so many people, and that's when I started getting involved in politics in a deeper way. Part of the Green Party in San Francisco, because the Democrats were almost like Republicans. So that's when Gavin Newsom won, and when Kamala Harris, I don't know if you know her, ran as DA that year. I was there. I was there, learning about San Francisco politics, and I feel like he really helped set me in motion to where I am today.
That actually inspires my next question. Okay, so would love for y'all to dispel some maybe, I guess, like misunderstandings about New York politics. And I guess if someone is watching this and they might live in New York and they have kind of tacitly observed what's going on in the city, but maybe don't have that much information, what would you want to tell them about New York City or New York politics, and what should they know?
You go first.
Okay, I'll go first. It is intense, and in the ways that don't always feel good. There are powers that are related to institutions that are, I think, built on white supremacy, and a lot of this is capitalism. And as you study it, and I'm still a student of this in so many ways, you see it in the real estate, in police, in criminal justice, in prisons, and how we think about legal services for immigrants. And I think that, I guess what I want to say is that it confronts us all on the city council, and I think we all come in with incredible progressive hearts, but when we're confronted with it, and the compromises that are being asked of us happen so slightly that over time we realize we're off track. And I'm talking about the collective. And so what I've been trying to do is just stay committed to my heart and my values, and which often land me in these small groups of people who vote no on things like voting on 4 jails in the city council. I thought that was, at the end of the day, not where we needed to land. The conversation had moved beyond building 4 jails so that we can close Rikers. And these are the examples that I think all of us have to, as elected officials, hold. And they're not easy because they piss a lot of people off, and sometimes you just don't want to piss off a union, so you go in a direction. And I've just always maintained my commitment to my values, my community, and which led us to slaying a few dragons, including a big developer of Industry City who just didn't get it. And I'm hoping that everything that gets restarted in Sunset Park really allows for the community to lead, which is what all we're asking for. You know, communities want development. They just want it in their spirit and in their vision, because the intelligence of our communities are really strong, be it the LGBT community or the immigrant community, or the working families. And so, but that doesn't always translate to power when someone is trying to make a decision on the floor of a city council. And so even if you're openly gay, it doesn't mean that you're going to vote in a progressive way. That's very just the truth. Marty?
Yeah, do you have anything to add?
Work.
Just gonna throw it out there. That's really
yeah, I would say, you know, I think people need to remember also that behind every candidate and elected, there's an army of staff who are working really long hours to get things accomplished, and it's a collective. And I think you know, people should recognize the great work of the incredible staffs that candidates and electeds have, and these are people who don't get paid enough, who have been blocked from, you know, unionizing in council, and who just really put themselves out there and work really hard. So I applaud every staffer of every elected and campaign, because it is hard work. And also, to just go off of what Carlos was saying, you know, I think it's important in a political world to hold on to your values. You have people coming at you from all sides telling you this is what you should do, and this is what you should do, and if you don't do this, you're this, and if you do this, you're this. But I always try to remember, like, what is the golden rule that we're taught since we were kids? You know, like, treat others how you want to be treated. And it's so simple, but that's how I want to govern, and it's how I want people in power to govern. And that means voting for what is the morally right thing. The morally right thing is to defund the police by $1 to $2 billion, which is not a big percentage of their budget, and put that money back into community. What does that morally mean? We don't need $9 billion for new jails. We need $9 billion for true affordable housing, for housing people experiencing homelessness. Why are we continuing the school to prison pipeline and incarcerating people for things they shouldn't be incarcerated for? You know, we need to lead with moral clarity. We can, instead of jailing people for addiction, I'm a drug addict. You know, thank God I'm in recovery, but I am a drug addict. And we are incarcerating people for having a disease instead of giving them a new life through paying for rehabilitation programs, giving them a free education at CUNY if that is the path they want to take, or a vocational program. And then we need to team up with our small businesses and hire people who have gone through these programs so they can have their life back. That is leading with moral clarity. And it's very easy in politics to have people coming at you saying this, that, and the other, and then you just vote that way. You have to stick to your guns, you know, and that's, you know, so I'm getting a little veered off in the question, but you know, I want people to remember, like, when they're thinking about New York politics, to always protest, show up and be loud and make that noise, because it does sway votes in chambers, and it can sway votes the more you push for progress. So I would say, don't think your voice isn't being heard. Progress may not happen today or tomorrow, but it will happen, and we need you to continue that.
Yeah, that's great. I
got a little on my stump speech there.
Keep it coming, honestly. Like, I'm here for, like, you're like, yes, like, in the defund the police and the school to prison pipeline, we've got to do it. Affordable housing in New York. No, all of these things are super important. One thing that I think might be very important to our audience is specifically the issue of kind of Black trans women and the alarming murders that we're seeing across our country, and just truly the way that this country beats down and oppresses our siblings. And I think back to speaking to kind of what Marty was saying around showing up and protesting the Trans Liberation March that happened over the summer, where we saw 15,000 people in white and in Brooklyn showing up and saying that Black trans lives matter. So on that topic, what are some tangible things that our audience can be thinking about related to that issue? And is there anything that you're planning on doing as you in elected office?
Well, let me if I could start, only because I think that there's so much that the council can do and the state government can do to continue to bring more protections, and all those things are important. But to, I think, the broader theme that elections matter, we are about to elect a whole new city council, new mayor, comptroller, public advocate will probably stay the same, Jumaane Williams. And I think that there needs to be a set of accountability through a political pressure that sets an agenda. And I feel like that agenda is becoming more and more clear about what needs to happen. And it's not just legal protections, it's access to mental health services, it's access to healthcare, it's access to things that the city has that is not made of readily available. Those are the kind of things that I think I want to see now before the next flip of the city administration. But those are things that we're hearing from people. Affordable housing, those are all things that are needed for our communities, and what we can really elevate today. The Liberation March was something that a lot of the council members couldn't go to because we were in budget negotiations at that time. But I remember getting texts from folks with the incredible police inactions that erupted as well. Those are the things that we need to heal. So anyway, I think we have a lot of work to do, but we can do that now.
Yeah.
Totally agree, you know, and what's so exciting about 2021, you know, obviously we have the election November 3rd. That's big deal. Go out and vote on the working families line, please, everyone. But coming up in 2021, we have an incredible opportunity to have a practically brand new legislative body in City Hall. How, and I always say this, how
well, remind me again, isn't it like 51 out of the 53 seats are open? Something crazy like that?
Every seat is open.
Right. Every seat. Wow.
Everyone's going for re-election.
35 are term limited. 35 are term limited. But like Carlos said, we're going to have a new mayor, new borough presidents, DAs in some boroughs, and all these council members. How often do you hear of an entire legislative body getting a fresh start? So people in every district need to really be looking at their candidates and seeing where their values line up. What are they putting into action? What are they fighting for? And some of the things we can fight for on a state level is advocating to get you know, our colleagues and friends in Albany to stop the walking while trans bill that's happening. That's the reason Layleen Polanco is no longer alive. Ending cash bail. She died in solitary confinement, and the mayor said that he will stop solitary confinement, invoking Layleen Polanco's name. It has not happened yet, and the 17 corrections officers are still on the job that were on watch when she was killed. So we need a mayor with a backbone who's not just going to give us lip service on his ridiculous morning briefings and shitty tweets that mean nothing. Because if you continue to spout bullshit and then nothing comes of it, you are bullshit and you're weak. And that is what our mayor is. He is weak. And I'm sick of it, and I'm excited for a new legislative body, and I'm excited to hopefully have a progressive legislative body that's going to not just talk the talk, but they're going to walk the walk and stand up for our Black and Latinx trans community who have been oppressed for far too long. These are actionable things we can do. Halt solitary, stop the walking while trans bill, and give healthcare, like Carlos said, and housing to people who need it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's it.
Yep.
There's a piece that I can't with him.
Yeah, I remember he was supposed to be a progressive champion in the presidential race as well. And that didn't quite happen either.
When he ran for president?
2021 coming up, am I right?
Elections matter.
Elections matter, and holding electeds accountable matter as well, which is why I think this mayor has gotten sidetracked, because you have to, politicians need to start putting people ahead of their own ego. And I think that's where this mayor went wrong. He put his ego above the people who live in this city.
That's right.
That's a good point. How should we hold elected officials accountable? What's the best ways to do that?
Beyond elections, I think elections become the place, but that's every 4 years in the city council and in the city. I think that part of what maybe I can speak for myself, is making yourself available for discussions in the community. I participate in something called participatory democracy, participatory budgeting, that really allows for people to help make decisions. That has infused how I think about land use. That's how I govern through the industry city rezoning, was to continually bring people who didn't really agree with each other, but to be able to feel like they're connected to this process. That's the accountability comes with communication and engagement with the local elected official. And I think that part of that is a voluntary process. I think elected officials volunteer to open themselves up for discussion. And I think we need to start embedding that into our actual system. Our system needs to open its doors of democracy for more people to engage. When you're talking about immigrants, and when we're talking about Latinx, trans community members that never feel like they can even come in and engage us, that has to change. They need to feel as empowered as anyone else in our city to be able to engage us as legislators, to help us build legislation. And they do that through organizations, but there should be less barrier to entry to help change a law, to help impact a budget. And I think when you saw the defund movement grow on the streets of New York and across the entire country, I mean, this is not just a New York City thing. And the city council decided not to actually defund the NYPD. I think that's one of those moments where you're like, well, what else do we have to do?
They did try to lie to us first, if I remember correctly.
Wait, say that again?
They did try to lie to us first. If I remember correctly.
There was that. Yeah, there was like a memo that said we're going to do it, and so I think all of those things all those things end up with an election, which is about to happen. In 2021, the whole new city, there's going to be a whole new city apparatus, and with new elected officials. Who are they going to be? The people will decide.
That's great. Is there anything coming up for this election in November in New York that we should be aware of?
No, I think everything is about voting. Everything is about getting the COVID rates continue to rise. That's going to impact, I think, how people engage, whether it's voting in person, early voting, or if they were able to get and request for a ballot. So right now it's all about voter kind of stopping voter suppression across the country. But in New York, I think right now it's just get the vote out. What do you think?
And stressing that, you know, early voting in this state in New York, where we are, begins October 24th. And so have a plan of action to vote early if you're able to. And for people who are watching in other states, make sure you're doing the research to find out when early voting starts for you. We need to come out in droves. And because Donald Trump, you know, when people show you who they are, believe them. That's the you know, famous Maya Angelou quote, right? And Donald Trump has time and time again shown us who he is. And Republicans in Washington have time and time again showed us who they are. And who they are corrupt people who will do anything possible to stay in power because they know that the majority of people in this country do not align with their views and values. And so we need to come out in droves when we vote. And I think it's really important to stress for New Yorkers to vote on the Working Families Party line down ballot, and look at who's running for state offices as well and see where they align, because we need to get a supermajority in the New York Senate. And the way to do that is by voting. So find out who's running in your district and just have a plan. Have a plan to vote. Go with your friend. Get some coffee on the way. Go with friends safely. Wear your mask.
Put it on the calendar.
Yeah. Wait, tell me, what's the Working Families Party? Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll start really quick, Marty, because this is how I became an elected official. It was the Working Families Party who endorsed me and really offered an opportunity and a platform to connect to a long string of political power. They are connected to unions. They allowed for someone like me to beat out an incumbent. I was the only council member that beat out an incumbent in 2013. So they are a political party here in the city, the state, and across the country. And they're really building out a network of power to allow for working families, just like we were talking about earlier, who never have access to power because of these institutions that don't allow for working families to have a say on salary and wages and healthcare and issues that matter to people who don't have money, like corporations that have stolen our elections. And so this is a growing movement across the country. Look them up. But like Marty said, vote down the line in New York. To keep the Working Families Party alive, we have to vote. And the governor has made it even more hard this year because more people have to vote on that line to keep it alive as a viable option for a party.
Cool. Yeah, I'll vote on Working Families Party line then.
Awesome.
So one other question I have is, as we think about, like, you two are both leaders, I would say, in the queer community. And so thinking about us as a community and kind of those like larger issues that we care and we pick up and we elevate, I'm wondering from your perspective, where do you hope the kind of queer rights movement starts to, I guess, go in the next few years? And what are some things that you're excited about there?
I would say I hope for our community as a whole that we start listening to the most vulnerable and marginalized among us. We're a marginalized group as queer people, but within our community, there are people who are marginalized. What we talked about earlier, Black and Latinx trans women who are are discriminated against within our own community. So I hope that through, you know, the work I do and the work Carlos does and other queer people in politics do, I hope that it brings people together to fight for those who are you know, not fully accepted within our own community. And it's time for the people in our community of, you know, privilege, you know, to stand up and defend and fight for others, and also to listen, to pause and listen to those voices. Queen Jean is an incredible person who, if you don't know who they are, look her up. She's a fierce trans woman who is on the streets literally every single day, hosting protests, throwing rallies, showing up at stuff. And so it's been an incredible honor to just pause and listen and take cues from her. And so I think as a community, we need to be doing more of that.
Yeah, definitely. And shout out to the Stonewall protests that happen every Thursday too.
Every Thursday.
That's been something that's building community and building a movement and building power. And it's been amazing to watch that grow over time.
Building community and like a muscle. We're gonna need that muscle to be strong for a while. I'll add. I think everything Marty said was amazing. Run for office as well. I think that's where we need our community to do that. And even if you think that your community and your district might not be open to it, that should not remove you from that ability to get out there and to speak your truth. And I think that's just the most beautiful thing that I think can happen in our city. Just more representation. The one area where I feel like we need to spend more time too is in schools. I feel like I'm spending a lot of time with middle school students and even some elementary school kids, where a lot of the kids are talking about being gender fluid, and the kind of school institutions are just not there yet to be able to create safe space. And when you look at what education facilities are, and I'm talking about private schools and charter schools, some charter schools, they're a little bit more advanced. We need the entire the public school system to be open and ready to welcome all children in our community. And I feel like that's where I want to see our work happen. And really, because this is the next generation. This next generation is going to take on the fights that we don't get right or we mess up. And I want to make sure that each and every one of them feel connected to their power.
I totally agree with Carlos on that. You know, we need to be our school system. Well, first of all, our school system in New York is incredibly segregated. So we need to integrate our school systems, but we also need to have a curriculum that is not, you know, American history classes in our school systems are a very skewed, one-sided part of history. So we need to have in our school curriculums, we need to have Black history, Indigenous history, women's history, and LGBTQIA+ history taught. And this way kids have a full understanding of different people from different communities, and we can learn and grow from one another's experiences and work together. And having safe spaces in schools, like Carlos said, is incredibly important. And one of the ways that we can do this, in addition to changing our curriculum, is getting cops out of schools and social workers into schools. We need to have classroom sizes that are smaller so teachers can give that individual attention to kids who need it, whether it's through learning or social issues. You know, there may be a kid who is queer and doesn't fit in at home and doesn't have a good home relationship because of who they are, and they may not even know who they are yet because they're so young, but they're still picked on in their home. They need teachers and social workers who can pick up on these things and really help them feel nurtured and accepted and loved. And the way to do this is through social workers, smaller classroom sizes, and a curriculum that teaches full equality.
Yeah, and look, right now we're in COVID, and so the entire system is being pummeled with a crisis that is still being understood right now. And when I talk to teachers and principals, it's every day is a crisis moment, and you feel for them. And I think that who knows when we're going to go all remote, because the COVID spike is going to get really intense. But I feel like what I'm realizing is that COVID is exposing all the the insecurities of our system itself, and rebuild everything. Education, we need to rebuild how we think about housing, how we think about land use, how we think about criminal justice and police. And I think now is the time. Now is the time for revolution. Now is the time for people to stand up and use that courage to say something, to demand accountability from elected officials. Elections matter. Everything we're saying right now. Now is the time. Climate change. I think we might have spoken about it at the beginning when we were talking about bikes, but climate change is that thing that we all need to have in our mind as we make the decisions of today. And I think that's what I'm excited to be in elected office. As someone who is queer, I'm also Mexican, and I speak Spanish, and I have my intersectional person. I want to make sure that everyone can feel like they can be in this space to demand it, because the traditional old white straight cisgendered man, that archetype has been the thing that has constructed the society. Now it's time for diversity, for us to stand up and represent. And so I'm just excited for where we are right now. It's ours to win. Yeah,
I completely agree. And I think you see across the city, there's and across the state, there's people that are waking up. And I think this summer, this crisis, it's all kind of coalesced to a moment that we find ourselves in. And as we look for new leadership and for new voices to enter the conversations, I'm very excited and very appreciative of you two both for being some of those voices. So I guess my final question, and on this we can end as I kind of descend into shadows. I guess my final question is, what is one thing you want to leave our audience with as they think about this upcoming election and also just, I guess, future movement building?
Okay, I'll go, Marty. Because when you want to go, you just go. I love it. Here is my takeaway. One, thank you for staying and hanging out with us today. I want you to take care of yourself. I want you to feel like you can choose self-care, to choose love for yourself, because that's what this world needs right now. This whole planet is under incredible chaos and crisis. And every time I want to walk outside, I want to be my best self. I want to start with love. And that's not easy. And that requires practice. So meditate, do some yoga, drink water, do the things that you need to do to show up with love. And whether you're going to run for office or support someone who runs for office, or make art, or just enjoy time with friends, show up with love. And I promise that's going to be the thing that changes this world. And we're going to need that right now.
It's beautiful. I love that. I want to say thank you, Wyatt, so much for moderating this, and Newfest for having us, and a big thank you to Carlos for your leadership and your voice in the council and whatever comes next. And I am very grateful to be a part of this panel today. And the takeaway that the viewers, who I'm grateful that you all spent the last 49 minutes with us. I hope the takeaway for you is a lot like what Carlos said, is finding moments of peace and serenity in the chaos, because it is a chaotic time for our entire world. We're in a pandemic, in the most critical election of our country's history. Food insecurity is at an all-time high. Job insecurity is at an all-time high. People experiencing homelessness, that's happening in record numbers. We have families ripped apart at the border still to this day. We have police who are still able to be on law enforcement even after they murder someone in cold blood simply for being who they are. There's so much happening, and it's overwhelming. And it's okay to feel overwhelmed and to feel anxious and to feel stressed. But know that through this chaos, that you are valued and you are loved and you are so worthy of goodness. And take those moments, like Carlos said, to do something for yourself, to be of service to yourself. Because when you're of service to yourself, you're able to go into the world to be of service to other people, whether that's volunteering at a food bank or buying someone a coffee at the coffee shop or volunteering for a campaign, or like Carlos said, running for office yourself. Be of service to yourself so you can show up for others. And check in on all your friends, even the ones who seem like the strongest people. Check in on them also and make sure they're doing okay. And know that when you go to the polls to vote, your voice does matter. Your protest does matter.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. It was such a pleasure. It definitely filled me with confidence. I sincerely appreciate both of you. So with that, we'll wrap up. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.